I'm going to share with you our text for this Sunday is from Mark chapter 1. Mark, many of you know, is the shortest of the Gospels. It's a gospel text of the four Gospels. Things happen really, really quickly. They have to because it's the shortest and it's all condensed, right? But in the Gospel of Mark, um, uh, what we hear is that there's really a call to action, and that it's like an immediate call to action. 27 different times in the Gospel of Matthew, the word immediately shows up. That's a lot, right? Immediately this happens, and immediately this happens, and immediately they go here, and immediately they go there. The disciples and and followers of Jesus, there's an immediacy that happens. Right? Even more times than 27, I didn't count them. There's a lot of at once's. Okay, the words at once. At once this happened. At once that happened. Right, and so there's a lot of urgency in the Gospel of Mark. That said, there's a strong call to action and a strong call to follow. Okay, and so what I want you to do today, as we read the Gospel text, I'd love for you to stand and to be ready, okay? And you don't have to be like in an athletic stance or anything, but do that. Go ahead and stand to indicate our sense that we are called to immediately follow Jesus. If you're at home and you're sitting in your bedroom or in your living room, go ahead and stand up and pay attention to the immediacy that happens in this gospel text. Mark chapter 1, beginning with verse 16. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Jesus said, "Follow me. I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and they followed him. And he went a little further. He saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending their nets. And immediately he called them. And they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired hand, and they followed him. Maybe see. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
I'm fine.
What's going on?
Nothing. You told me to call you.
Oh, you saw on the screens. Please call this number, and you responded.
Yes.
None of you got that. So Ben, what are you doing right now?
Currently, I'm showing the screen.
Oh, okay. So I'm supposed to be preaching, so I'm gonna let you go. All right? Okay. Hey, thanks for calling, buddy. Oh, Katie's calling too. Okay. Okay, we can stop. How easy is it for us to hear the call, to listen and to respond to the call of Jesus? Now, it's not the same kind of call, just getting a phone call, right? It's not the same kind of call at all. But in some sense, it is. When we think about Jesus calling his disciples, early on in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus calls first two fishermen and then two more, and then after a while there's more that are called, but it's one of the first things that Jesus does. Right after Jesus is baptized, after there's this temptation story, the first thing that Jesus does is he kind of gets the gang together and says, I need you to follow me. I'm going to need some partners. And I want to explore with you today the call that Jesus has for his disciples, and then to wonder together about the call that Jesus has on your life and on my life. I have 4 points that I hope that you may take home today from this gospel text as we wonder about them together. Okay, and as Jesus is calling first Simon and Andrew, and then as Jesus calls James and John, we got to recognize this, that calls, and think about this in your daily life. I'll lead you through these. Don't jump me out, right? That's fine. You stay there. Calls, often, they interrupt our days. I don't know about you, but it's pretty easy if somebody sends me a text message, right? To say, oh, I'll get to that later, right? In fact, I send a lot of text messages that get ignored, right? But in particular to my kids. But it calls, a phone call, it interrupts. Even if we're having a conversation with someone else, right? And somebody calls us, we pull out our phone and we say, oh, sorry, hold on 1 second. Oh, I'll just ignore that, right? But calls demand our attention. And the call of Jesus demands an action, a response. Okay? And as we think about calls, I want to encourage you to think about making some phone calls rather than just texting folks. There are a lot of folks that are hurting right now. There are a lot of folks that are in need right now. And there are a lot of folks that need more than just a text message. Hey, how you doing? There's a lot of folks in our congregation who need a phone call to say, I miss you. I hope that you're doing okay. Is there anything I can do to help you? Calls are something that they interrupt, and they are hard to ignore. So our first take home is that calls they interrupt, and they're something that demand an action on each of us. Now, if you go to the next one now, Cindy. I don't know if you go to the grocery store all that often or not. On Thursday night, I went to Fairway 3 different times for 3 different things. And some of that was my own thing because I forgot the thing that I was supposed to go get, right? But if I go to Fairway, usually I show up and I wear a ball cap. And I usually have a pair of headphones in because I'm listening to usually another preacher that's much better than me, and I'm listening for their techniques and what they're doing. And usually, I walk around the right with this thing on, right? And so I walk around, and there's a whole lot that's blocking me, right? And that's all of us, right? We have a whole lot that is blocking us. And I want to ask this question as we think about calls, that sometimes we don't hear the call because there's so much going on in our lives. I'm just grocery shopping, but I got a podcast that I'm listening to. I got other things that I'm thinking about, right? And you and I in our daily lives, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening. And it's hard for us sometimes, with very busy lives, with lots and lots and lots of stuff on our to-do list, to hear the call. This cartoon from Mike Waters, really, I think nails it. With this being on a lawn chair, who's got a TV in front of him and a magazine in his lap and a radio and headphones and sunglasses, and they're out sunbathing, and the person says, I wonder why I don't hear from the shepherd anymore, right? I wonder why I don't hear God talking to me anymore. And in the background, you see the shepherd who's calling out and saying, Layton, right? In the background, you see the shepherd who's going on and saying, I need you, hey, over here, right? And we're saying, well, I don't get it. I don't really feel like God is calling me into anything. And that's an opportunity for us to think about what are the things that are filling our lives, and then for us maybe to think about breaking down some barriers, and maybe think about getting comfortable with some silence again. Go to the next one. How easy was it for you? Now Ben kind of jumped the gun. How easy was it for you when I sat down right after the reading? Was that an uncomfortable moment for you, or were you okay with it? And let me ask you this: how comfortable would you have been if it went on just a little bit longer? And then a little bit longer, and then a little bit longer. How comfortable are you with silence? Because if we don't hear the call of Jesus, we also have to check in with ourselves and wonder, am I doing any devotion? Am I doing any prayer life? Is it too noisy and too busy and too loud in my life to hear the shepherd? Now, those of you that are gathering here this morning, it might be a little bit easier for you because you're taking some time in worship to listen for the shepherd to guide you and to direct you. For those of you that are worshiping online this morning, it might be a little bit easier for you to hear the voice of the shepherd calling for you and directing your life. But we also know that there are many folks who have very busy schedules and then who say, I don't know if God is talking to me anymore. I don't know if God is calling for me anymore. As we think about and wonder about the call of Jesus on his disciples, first we need to recognize the calls interrupt. And second, we need to recognize that when we are not available to the call of the shepherd, it's no wonder that we don't hear the shepherd calling us. If we constantly are hitting ignore, or constantly saying, I'll get to that later, right? Well, there's no way that we're gonna hear the voice of Jesus calling for you and calling for me. Now, when we think about calling in Mark's gospel, you go to the next one. When you think about calling, Jesus calling his disciples in Mark's gospel, one of the things that we might respond with, one of the things that we might wonder about, is how many people did Jesus call or invite or beckon before Jesus got to Simon and Andrew and James and John? I wonder about that. If there were folks who said, you couldn't possibly use me. If there were folks who said, you know what, I got a lot going on right now. Go down the lakeshore a little bit further. There's this guy named Simon. He might be able to help you. I've wondered about that. But I also wonder about our own selves when we hear, when there's a need placed on our heart, that we would say, well, I couldn't possibly do anything about that. I'm not important enough. I'm not worthy enough. I couldn't possibly do it the right way. And this text allows us to wonder about the fact that Jesus, at least in our text, he doesn't first ask Simon and Andrew and James and John for a complete social media history to find out if they've messed up or not, right? Jesus doesn't first ask Simon and Andrew and James and John for a sample of their handwriting. He doesn't first ask them to come and sit down for an interview. He doesn't first ask them if they are qualified, right? What he does is he calls them. And when we might have a need placed on our hearts to help in this community or to help in a big way or in a small way, often we would say, I couldn't possibly. And so if we think about some takeaways or some take-homes from this, that calls interrupt, they get in the way, and that often we need to avail ourselves to the calling of Jesus, we also have to recognize this, that God does not call the qualified, but that God equips those who are called. God does not call the qualified, but God equips those who are called. I love this tweet from Luke Lazan. I don't know who this guy is, but I really like what he said. He said, Jesus doesn't say, come to me, all you who are crushing it, who are living your best life, and I will give you rest. He says, come to me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. That's good. That's really, really good. For us then to think about if we're discouraged or if we're tired or if we're weary, don't worry. That's exactly how Jesus expects you to come to him. Another way of saying that is that God does not call the qualified, but God equips those who are called. God equips Simon and Andrew and James and John and you and me. But often we would say, there's somebody more important, there's somebody more qualified, there's somebody more able to do what you are asking me to do. As we wonder about Jesus calling his disciples, our first take home might be that calls are hard to ignore, and that usually they interrupt and they demand an action. That that it is often up to us to listen for the call of Jesus, and then that God does not call the qualified, but equips those who are called. Now, what does it look like to be called by Jesus? You might be wondering that. What does it look like to be called by Jesus? Well, what does it look like for Simon and Andrew and for James and for John? Might give us a clue. Mark's gospel is a gospel of immediacy. It's a gospel of action. There's things that are happening. And so Mark's gospel, in the first chapter, there's several different things that are happening in Mark's gospel. Right after Jesus calls his first disciples, they go to Capernaum, and there's this demon-possessed individual who enters into the synagogue, into the place of worship, and immediately, right after Jesus calls disciples, there's this exorcism of sorts that happens. And right after that, the disciples and Jesus, this band of like 5 followers, they go to Simon's house, and Simon's mother-in-law is ailing. And because Jesus and his disciples, they heal this one person, there's this whole line of folks who show up for healing. And then right after that, Jesus goes in this like little preaching tour in the region of Galilee. And then right after that, there's this cleansing of lepers that happens. Following Jesus is a little bit less of a comfortable status quo life. Because the call of Jesus means, friends, that there is work to do. There is a lot of work to do. If you and I might listen to the call of Jesus, we've got to recognize that we've got some work to do. And that Jesus calls each and every one of us because there is a lot of need. There are a lot of people who are hurting, both in this community and beyond. There is a lot of need. And answering the call of Jesus means that you and I, we need to get out of our status quo, regular old lives, and get willing to be empowered by the Spirit for service and for action and for sacrifice and for dedication, if we might only listen to the call of Jesus. Jesus does not call those who are the most upstanding citizens, those who are most able, those most capable of filling the need in the world. But there is a lot of need. And I wonder, John, if you might be willing to answer the call. Leslie, I wonder if you might be willing to answer the call. Lisa, I wonder if you might be willing to answer the call. That means then that our lives are interrupted. That means then that we might get comfortable listening for the call of Jesus. That means that we trust that Jesus will equip us for the work ahead of us. But that means, friends, that we answer this big and heavy and holy call of being a follower of Jesus.